Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CAF News. I'm here as usual, Kevin Donovan, with my good friend Bryce Ominski. How you doing, Bryce?
Doing really good today, Kevin. Well, it's going to be interesting today. We're going to talk to a bunch of stories around several different themes. So we're going to look at, some of the trade-offs in controlling infrastructure versus relying on third parties. We're going to touch on designing for geopolitical and supply chain risk, balancing
Yeah.
agility, governance, maybe talk a little bit about companies that want to maybe take over the world with new ideas around innovation, a little bit of a hint as to what's coming. And of course, we're going to be looking at data architecture trends um, and where they're going. So there's, I think, 7 stories we have. We'll see if we can get through them all today. The first one is really going to Amazon, is starting to use generative AI internally to guide their financials. So this is more than backroom ops. It's actually using this to do things like build out transfer pricing analysis, do revenue product analysis, evaluation, and drafting internal reports. And I think, Kevin, this is really a sign that AI is starting to become more strategic, more adopted. Uh, it's almost evidence, there's the haters that are saying AI is never going to get here. And then we look at something like this, and to me, that's a clear signal that it's in. What do you
Yeah.
think, Kevin?
Yeah. Everyone is talking about 90% failure rates of AI projects and, all hype, all hot air. Um, I don't think Amazon will go down that road. I don't think that's their style.
Hmm.
And that they're using it does not surprise. The fact that they're applying Gen AI to internal financial analysis is really interesting. And of course, because they own AWS, this is all happening within their own stack. So that they have total control, security. They reduce any regulatory risk. You know, are they then, of course, going to use this to inform their offering? Yeah, I'm sure they will. It'll be interesting to see how it shapes the way they go to market more with Gen AI offerings or AI offerings in general.
And that really raises an interesting point, Kevin. If I was a company that wanted to adopt AI more in, say, my financials, what do I need to do to make that happen? And you brought up a great point. Amazon has everything internally. There's no risk of vendor lock-in with them. And more importantly, there's no, or at least they're minimizing the security risk and sharing. I think a startup would have to deal with that, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, there's always those trade-offs, own versus outsource. Startups and enterprises have to decide where do you want control. There's obviously, if you're in a highly regulated industry, there's a lot of compliance to be thinking about, but there's also, the models and their training, the semantics in the data. So, where do you want control and where can you be dependent on a third party?
And
That's
in
been,
terms of the lock-in, this really another story that we're looking at is OpenAI is pushing towards developing their own full stack
yes.
AI stack, right? And so now, if we look at what they're doing in the context of Amazon, Amazon's probably rebranding a lot of the ChatGPT stuff, I would expect. Or I can't remember, Kevin. Do they actually have their own AI that's completely independent to the OpenAI stuff, or are they rebranding ChatGPT? Do you know offhand?
You know what? What provider are they using? I don't believe they're using their own. I haven't heard a lot of Alexa recently. But that's a great question. Who are they using? Is it Gemini or is it OpenAI? That's a great question. Somebody out there can, I'm sure, chip in with an answer there. But again, yeah, it's the same kind of. I mean, OpenAI sees
I
this.
think it's a little bit of a mixed bag, if I recall, with Amazon, because I'm just trying to think. They've got their chatbot, which is really like it's a chat. They got, I think it's called Amazon Q or something, which is available, right? Which leverages some stuff. They rely heavily on Anthropic for their large language
Oh,
models.
I'm sorry. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they've invested, as a matter of fact, recently, a fairly large investment in Anthropic.
But they
For
do
that.
resell, but I think they do resell it. And that brings up a really good point now. I mean, this is the gist of it. With somebody like OpenAI going full stack, is this a disincentive towards other companies like Amazon, like Google, that offering ChatGPT wrapped services?
I see OpenAI's moves more in competition almost with NVIDIA. I mean, they're looking to build their own chips, run their own data centers, integrate more into, enterprise, so that they blur the line between that vendor platform infrastructure. But it is the same kind of trade-offs you need to be looking at. I think they're just looking at Jensen Huang's playbook a little bit closer and thinking, yeah.
Well, and that's a great point. If you look at the way things are progressing, there's clearly early dominance with NVIDIA lower in the stack.
Yeah.
And other companies, as you move up the stack, like Palantir, I think Palantir, I think a lot of these companies are offering products around the stack, haven't hit their full potential yet. I mean, we haven't really seen the explosion. I mean, and the other side to this is chip production is physically limited at the time. We only have so much chip foundry capability, but
Sure.
building off that stack and coming up with ideas is pretty much unlimited. And that brings us into the next story. How do you take over the world and bring in unlimited creative ideas? Well, I guess there's a couple of places we could look. I think one, though, is Meta is really starting to do, I think, two things that are really interesting. The first one is, of course, they've invested heavily in very expensive and senior talent. And that's coupled with small but agile, innovative research groups. So they're going away from this big think tank to small, innovative research groups. I think that really bodes well for the small guy. I think what that message to me is that people in their home labs, doing what they're doing, can still come up with breakthroughs if they're really good. But watch out. I think something like Meta is really trying to capitalize on it. Where do you, and this is really interesting, Kevin, because we're seeing Meta do this at the same time that other companies are sort of throwing off some very good workers. Like recently, Microsoft did a massive layoff, and a lot of good workers were in that whole thing. I mean, it's not it's not an attempt to reduce deadwood. It's definitely trying to reduce spend overall. Where do you think Meta is going with this? Is this a plan? Well, clearly plan to take over the world, but do you think it's going to be effective, this idea of going to more agile teams, Kevin?
I have wondered about their strategy. Like everyone, my jaw dropped at the 10-figure salary offers that were being talked about. It's like, are you kidding me?
Just want to hold it. I am open to one of those offers. If
yeah, Mark, if you're watching.
Yes, just if he's just watching, and I have it on not so good authority that he's a regular viewer here, but you never know, right?
Yeah. I mean, 8 and 9 figure would do it too, for that matter. But can you leverage that, and how do you leverage that? It's interesting that they are moving toward this, smaller, nimbler team model with such heavy hitters. Now, maybe they're not in those teams. That's hard to say. But in general, yes, bite size. I think you should be looking at developing, especially new and unproven services and technologies in smaller, faster iterations. And that could be a Meta strength. It's certainly in their DNA. Will it pay off? I don't know. There seems to be a lot going on. It's shiny object syndrome at Meta. Like, where are the glasses? Where's the VR? Where's the, I don't know.
Well, that really raises an interesting question as we start to accelerate with technology in general, and things start to move quicker, right? So deployment cycles start to shorten. What you waited 5 years to develop takes a year. Can you afford to have larger teams at all now, in the sense that you're committed now to a technology that may never pan out? At least with smaller teams, they might come up with something. Going back in
Yeah.
history, I remember, looking at AI, but this is in the 90s, and we were looking at it, and we said, oh, AI, and there was another technology called object oriented, and I think they both had their runs, so to speak. But now it's not a matter of 5 years to learn the technology. It's that could change in literally a year or less. We could see new things shake the whole landscape.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And those smaller teams, can probably be more productive as well with effective use. Especially if you're coding. So sure, I totally agree that that's going to be a more nimble, more agile approach. But yeah, can you stay focused and can you get it out the door before it's no longer, applicable? That's that's a great question because the ball does move rather fast.
And talk about unexpected plays. We have Huawei building superclusters with their Ascend series of chips, or building those out. And they claim that their superclusters are giving better performance than the NVIDIA-based data centers with, the Blackwells and the current edge chips. I'm skeptical of that claim, Kevin. I got to tell you, I think that's just propaganda. I think we're getting a lot of propaganda in this whole chip war thing. And I mean, we're also finding that NVIDIA, they've got the the Chinese Anti-Combines Act is trying to get them.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think there's a lot of propaganda coming out of there around the direction that they're going. And although I think it's notable that Huawei probably has an answer or some solution, I'm very skeptical it's going to compete with the NVIDIA data centers and the way they're architected.
Yeah, that is, I mean, sure, by all means go after it, but that's a big windmill to tilt at. You know, they certainly have the wherewithal to, go in that direction and God bless them, I guess. But yeah, I'd be suspect of claims until I saw the market moving in that direction. And I don't see that anytime really soon. But, stranger things have happened, I suppose. And there's a lot of creativity out there, I mean, the whole, for a while back, DeepSeek. And yeah, the first cuts of that story turned out not to be quite exactly the actual story, the full truth. But there were some very real and good innovations there, and nice that it was open sourced, that are pushing the state of the art. So, can they do the same on the hardware stack and infrastructure? Yeah, maybe, sure, why not?
And just to go into DeepSeek, that was a story that we actually covered, Kevin,
Yes, we
and
did. We
addressed.
broke
So
it,
we
Bryce.
broke it. Well, we went into the hype, and we stared right into the hype as it came at us like a tidal wave. So,
Yeah.
and that brings us to our final story, is that there's an increasing trend around data architecture to go with, I guess, data diversification kind of approaches over centralized monoliths. So they become business aligned. We're starting to see things move towards semantic layers. Zero copy access is becoming a big thing to improve performance and a way to reduce data duplication. I don't think there's any surprise that we're seeing this, actually. I think this is a natural evolution of the need to change very quickly. And data, I think, is very flexible compared to hard coding stuff. And, and centralized data, I think, is a lot less flexible than being able to pull it in from places as you go. Do you see these trends, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this hopefully is going to settle and boil down into reference patterns that, will need to be proved out and tried and iterated on. But it certainly is going to be important work in architecture for the next 5 years at least, I'd say. Being able to kind of, boil down these, these best practices into repeatable patterns that, ensure that data lineage is maintained and that we have, clean data and as much, from source and not copied, all the litany of good data hygiene. But just becomes more and more important and needs to be more and more a part of what you think about when you're addressing issues across the enterprise because of the usage of data in so many differing and expanding ways.
I think across the enterprise and across broader ecosystems. So I think there's three types of patterns that we're going to see come out of this: federation-based patterns that empower finance and marketing, but ultimately enable organizations to share data and stuff as a product across broader ecosystems. And that in turn, I think as people start to leverage that, is going to enable a move from a product mindset to a service dominant logic kind of mindset when it comes to business. And I think we're going to see that shift sort of start slowly and then really accelerate. The second thing that we're seeing is semantic layers and shared ontologies. And obviously that increases shared meaning as we go into ecosystems. We're seeing companies already that are starting to work on this within the enterprise, like Palantir, I think has really successfully integrated, their ontological stack with their data very nicely. And then we were talking about zero copy within the enterprise. I think that's really going to be a step forward to, performance improvement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're already seeing a lot of, smaller scale, but good examples of knowledge graphs, just as simple as giving the LLM an idea of the relationship between, a form of ontology. That it, allows far greater accuracy and consistency in outputs. So yeah,
that's a great point with the LLMs. You just hit a nail on the head. The idea of using ontology really starts to limit hallucinations.
Yes.
And that's a huge finding, I think, when you start to bring a standardized terminology. And let's face it, if we're, everybody's looking at AI like, well, what can it do? What can it do? But when you start to move it into the people realm and go, how does it compare to a person? I think, we would expect a person to have an understanding of the meaning of their domain that they're working in. I think that's an expectation also for AI. We need to start providing that meaning probably with ontological layers so that it's what they come up with as standard. Because really that's what hallucination is. It's coming up with some really crazy interpretation of something.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's just probabilistic.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be true. So it's nice to keep to constrained relationships between concepts. It's a very good idea.
Perfect. That's our stories for today. Thanks everyone for listening. If you have comments, please add them below. If you want to, we'd love to hear what your thoughts are on what Amazon is using, where they're going, how people are going to be using some of these AI tools, maybe to avoid vendor lock-in, and what it might mean for somebody like Amazon, for OpenAI to move towards a full AI stack. And what does that mean to existing people like Amazon and Google and Microsoft that are serving these up? Is that going to be, a huge shift in the competition? Or is that just another opportunity for the big data centers to eat that up and serve it?
Yeah, and especially interesting, for architects, this entire owning versus outsourcing, the, third party, the trade-offs in third parties versus, controlling the infrastructure to whatever degree. Where do you want that control and where can you tolerate to be dependent on others? And I suppose that line, that fault line roughly follows strategic capabilities versus commodity. But interesting to see and hear where people see that line falling out and what they're actually doing about it, what the hybrid approaches are. That'd be super interesting if you have any thoughts or experience in that. Love to hear about it.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kevin.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bryce. See y'all.